Dad and the fiery pit of hell. My father had a scofflaw streak a mile wide. Without crossing the line into true criminality, he broke rules with abandon. Stop, one-way street was just a suggestion. No parking was an invitation to stop and sit a while. His particular genius for running up the down staircase culminated in the garbage pit incident. Dad built his dream home on a long, narrow 2.5-acre parcel of agricultural land, dotted with groves, orchards, and vineyards, and nestled against the western slope of the central Sierra Nevada mountains. The house was situated nearly dead center on the lot, leaving large pastures to the front and back. The front pasture was bordered by a brown-painted wooden corral fence, within which Dad had planted several weeping willow trees, plus a scattering of eucalyptus and olives. The back pasture stood empty for years, occasionally occupied by a few cows or sheep. Once Dad passed his 65th birthday, he began struggling with feelings of irrelevance and loss. He'd lost his career to retirement, his youth to time, and his autocracy to grown kids and a wife who, in her own bloom of postmenopausal power, simply refused delivery on his crap. So, Dad got creative. He started dragging home a succession of boats, RVs, and classic cars, most of which rotted away in the sun until being sold for far less than he'd paid for them. He also entered his outbuilding phase. If a pile of junk disturbed him, he'd build an outbuilding around it. That pretty view of the almond orchard with the mountains beyond that Mom loved so much, block it with an outbuilding. If the driveway was just a scooch too easily accessible, plant an outbuilding in its path. Pretty soon, he'd covered our place with a scab of little shacks, artfully built from old barn lumber, cheap and plentiful then, and hung with whatever dilapidated old tools and random metal junk he could scrounge up. Dad was the OG of rusty vintage yard art. One Saturday, a big boring rig arrived, mounted on an oversized truck, which carefully nosed its way between the pump house, the garden shed, the pool house, and the bicycle shed. After making it into the back pasture, the driver and his crew set up the boring equipment and with quick efficiency drilled 3 10-foot by 12-foot holes, managing to tear off a chunk of barge board along the carport roof as they left. As my mom and I stood at the edge of one newly dug deep and dangerous hole, watching the bottom dampen from our low water table, I heard her mutter under her breath, "Hell's bells, what has that man done now?" Which is the closest she ever came to swearing. Mom never took the Lord's name in vain, but when hell's bells or some similar southern epithet was uttered, everybody better duck. Over the course of the next couple of years, Dad proceeded to fill up those holes with trash. Yard clippings, old furniture, newspapers, pretty much anything he deemed vaguely biodegradable, including the occasional rusty metal object which he assured us would simply decay and disappear in a couple hundred years or so. Once, he discovered a raccoon trapped in a partially filled hole. After pondering how to rescue the poor thing, he called animal control and told them what had happened. I can only imagine what the guy on the other end of the phone was thinking. Finally, he said something to the effect of, "Sir, there's nothing we can do to help you. You might try putting a ladder down into the hole and see if the raccoon will climb out." Dad thought this was a dandy idea, so he dragged an extension ladder out to the hole and carefully lowered it down so as not to conk the raccoon on the head. The next day, the raccoon was still there. Dad was getting worried that the raccoon would starve or die of thirst, so he lowered a bucket down into the hole, then filled it up with a hose. Then he dumped a bag of cat food into the hole and hoped for the best. That raccoon enjoyed his stay at the free buffet with lovely accommodations, while Dad supplied him with daily food and drink. It climbed out and skedaddled after about a week. I wonder if the raccoon ever thought about his luxury vacation and considered coming back. Finally, the first hole was filled to overflowing. But instead of hiring somebody with a tractor to smash it down and cover it over with dirt, he decided he could get more utility from it if he burned the contents. So, one Saturday morning in June found my father, gas can in hand, considering the mound of trash. "I don't think you should do that, Grandpa," was my son's wise counsel as he backed away, watching my father pour gasoline around the perimeter of the hole. My dad kept pouring and my son kept backing until the gas can was empty. Then Dad lit a match and tossed it in. Nothing. He lit another match and flipped it in after the first. Nothing. My son, from a safe distance of about 50 feet, had just enough time to utter the words, "Seriously, Grandpa, I don't think you..." when all of a sudden the contents of the pit exploded upwards, still holding its cylindrical shape, and hung there like Michael Jordan sinking one from the free throw line. Then, whoosh! It dropped back into the hole with a fiery crash. Flames erupted outward, taking burning paper, sofa fragments, shrubbery clippings, old clothes, and other unidentified bits with them. The pyroclastic flow of Dad's homemade volcano flash burned his face and singed off his eyebrows. Hearing the explosion from the living room, my mother and I looked up from our gin rummy hands before tossing the cards willy-nilly and heading for the back pasture at a dead run. "Damn Sam," I heard her exclaim. "What has that man done now?" We found my dad, red-faced and devoid of eyebrows, slapping out the little fires in the pasture grass with a flathead shovel, while my son struggled to drag a hose to the scene, water gushing full blast. Soon the scattered fires were out, but the contents of the hole smoldered for days. Mama could be heard occasionally muttering "hell's bells" under her breath for the rest of the summer.